What I'm going to do today is to take you through. Many people recognize they've come here to Pennington. Every year you come for women's health, men's health, and as you drive by on Perkins, you see the building. And many people wonder, well, what really do you do here? You know we do research, but what I'd like to do today is to kind of take you through. I'd like to first take you through our history, take you through why we exist because of the public health concerns, what we've done, what we're doing, and how you can help. So I'm sure everyone knows this, but let's just start with our history. Actually, our history starts with back in 1980. When Claude Pennington donated $125 million to LSU to create, and then this is his memo where it still hangs in the executive director's conference room to create the best nutrition research center in the country. That was his dream. And again, George Bray, who I knew when I was in Los Angeles, actually took the first executive director job in 1988, and the rest is history. So if you look at our campus, again, really from humble beginnings, starting with three buildings originally, and you can see over the years it's grown to where the Conference Center in 1993, the Lodge, a state-of-the-art basic science building, a few years ago, a state-of-the-art clinical science building where many of you have come for research studies, an imaging building, and just recently we've renovated and now have a separate pediatric obesity arm. So the center has grown. We have about 450 staff, over 75 faculty, and I'm going to show you some of the accomplishments and what we're doing today. So our research, when we talk about obesity and diabetes and nutrition, we like to say it focuses on the problems of Louisiana. In fact, our focus aligns with Louisiana's health concerns. But what's happening today? You can actually scratch Louisiana, and you could say now it aligns with the country's health concerns, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment. So the next thing I want to show you is, okay, now you know our history. We're here, we've grown, we do research in nutrition, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. So let's talk about why it's important to have a center such as Pennington. Well, take a look at this. When we talk about Louisiana's chronic disease problem, we talk about obesity and diabetes and dementia. And now we know that associated with these conditions, you can have cognitive decline. It cost our state $10.6 billion a year. $10.6 billion to care for the disease, $10.6 billion for lost productivity and wages. This is a lot of money. When you talk about now the budgetary crisis in the state, just imagine what would happen. If we could even reduce this 10%, it would be fantastic. But let me show you some others. So not only do these chronic diseases cause problems to the state, they're not serving us well in the public perception. The United Health Foundation, over the past 25 years, rates the states. They rate the states as the healthiest to unhealthiest based on a number of parameters, on obesity, on diabetes rates, on how well you do for smoking cessation and other factors. Well, now all we can say is we're now the most unhealthiest state in the country. We've bumped Mississippi from the bottom. Louisiana ranks 50th this year, moving Mississippi out of the bottom spot to 49th. Arkansas is 48th, West Virginia is 47th. We dropped from 48th to 50th. Louisiana is 50th this year and 48th in 2014. I was coming back from Jackson, Mississippi about a week ago, and I heard people say, thank God for Louisiana. If it wasn't for Louisiana, Mississippi would be at the bottom. How times have changed. Well, this is not something to be proud of, okay? And it's something that we need to change. Well, when we talk about now part of the problem, let's start with the global problem first. Around the world, the latest estimates for diabetes is that there's about 415 million people with diabetes around the world, and this is going to grow by about 2040 to about 642 million. And you can just see the growth since 2000. The color change signifies the growth of diabetes throughout the country, such that 2025, again, one of the largest percentages are going to be in Southeast Asia. However, the population, the prevalence of diabetes, the U.S. is still one of the higher countries in the world as far as percent of its population having diabetes. Obviously, India and China have more diabetics because of the population. But the percentage of the population having diabetes, the United States is one of the top. So if we're one of the top countries, what's concerning to us is how did we get there? And basically, it all starts with obesity. And I'm going to show you where obesity begins and how it relates to diabetes and what Pennington is now doing about it. All right, so this state, Catherine, don't get upset. This is not the Republican and Democratic state map, okay? What this map indicates, she was getting a little worried. I just had to calm her down. What this map indicates is the counties or parishes. The red states indicate those parishes and counties with a higher prevalence of of obesity. So if you look at now this area, we can argue that, well, this looks like an obesity belt because this area of southeast United States, the red states indicate higher prevalence of diabetes. So would everyone agree? Looks like an obesity belt? Correct? Okay. All right, well then here's the problem. Where you see obesity in a population, where you see obesity, you start seeing blood pressure problems. You start seeing cholesterol problems. You start seeing other metabolic abnormalities that eventually lead to type 2 diabetes and heart disease. And Louisiana's obesity rate is up from 28% in 2004 and 12% back in 1990. So it's tripled in about 20 years. Now, so we refer, when you talk about obesity now, and obesity with blood pressure problems and lipid problems and glucose problems, we can now say that really that's prediabetes, or what we refer to as metabolic syndrome. So that's where it starts. Now let's go back to that map. Now, this is the number of cases of diabetes. Now, the diabetes cases in the U.S. seem to overlap where the obesity was. So where you see obesity in a population, 5 to 7 years later, in the future, you're going to see increased cases of diabetes. So now we can refer to that diabetes belt, and you could almost argue that Louisiana is the buckle in the belt. So the problem is that if the United States has one of the higher prevalences of diabetes in the world, and Louisiana now has one of the higher prevalences, population with diabetes, we can look around the state and around Baton Rouge. Even though we're well above the national average, some of the parishes around Baton Rouge are 30 to 50% above the national average. Some of the parishes in North Louisiana are even higher. So the United States has one of the greatest percentages of its population in the world with diabetes, and Louisiana is top of the nation, or leading the nation, in one of the 5 to 7 states with obesity, a large percent of its population with obesity and diabetes, and the surrounding Baton Rouge area is an area that has, some of our rural parishes, some of the higher rates of diabetes. Okay, so if you have diabetes, here's why we want to prevent it. It's one of the leading causes of atraumatic blindness. Half the people on dialysis have diabetes. One of the leading causes of peripheral neuropathy and amputation. It's one of the leading causes of cardiovascular disease, including heart disease. In fact, 7 out of 10 people with diabetes will ultimately die of a cardiovascular event. So even though it's a blood pressure problem, all the other associated problems, heart disease remains the main problem with a person with diabetes. Okay, so what do? Well, you don't wake up one morning with diabetes. You don't wake up one morning with diabetes. You have warning signs. And some of the tests that are done out there today will tell you about your warning signs. But prediabetes is a condition that can be 5, 10, 15 years. In fact, going from prediabetes to diabetes, we know who is going to be at high risk for developing the disease. And it actually starts, prediabetes starts with a normal blood sugar. So your sugar is actually normal, but what happens is your body becomes a little bit more resistant to the insulin, and your body becomes efficient, so you begin to produce more insulin. But here's what I want to point out. A blood sugar less than 199 is normal. Anything above that, up to 125, is prediabetes. And if you have a blood sugar in the hundreds but less than 125, you should seek medical attention that may indicate prediabetes. Well, you may have prediabetes with a blood sugar of 100, and you may have some of the other problems, because this is where we refer to this as prediabetes or that metabolic syndrome. Remember, I showed you that curve where obesity leads to blood pressure and lipids. That's what we're talking about before the blood sugar becomes abnormal. So there are risk scores that you can take where you can assess your risk for developing diabetes over the next 5 years, and these will allow you, again, to have a pretty good understanding at who's at risk and what you need to do. Okay, to show you that prediabetes is important, this is a study that looked at heart disease risk. In fact, this is the Nurses' Health Study. So this is a study in females where they took individuals and they followed women for many, many years. And those that developed the disease obviously were labeled as diabetes. And then they went back in the chart. And they went back in the medical records and said, okay, well, if you developed diabetes, what was your risk 5 years before and 10 years before, based on waist and blood pressure and lipids? And essentially assess that 15 years before the diagnosis, going from a non-diabetic to diabetes, 15 years before diagnosis in the pre-diabetic, the person had a 2.4 greater risk. When that person was diagnosed 10 to 15 years before, 3.2-fold greater risk. Less than 10 years before, 3.6-fold greater risk. And if you're diabetic throughout, 5-fold greater risk. The closer you get to developing the glucose abnormality that defines diabetes, the greater the heart disease risk. So actually, if you have diabetes, you actually have the same risk as someone who's already had a heart attack. Okay? So someone who does not have heart disease and non-diabetic, if they have a heart attack, they have an increased risk. But you, as an individual with diabetes, already have that increased risk. So you have to even get more aggressive. By the time you develop diabetes, you can see it's been many, many years in the making. Okay, so body shape matters, and this is where for years we've talked about the apple-shaped individual as opposed to the pear-shaped, the thin waist, increased weight, adiposity around the hips and thighs. Obviously, the apple-shaped individuals are a little bit more at risk. But now we recognize there are scans that can do this a lot better for us. Again, you can see the muscle mass here, the heart. The white signifies the fat. And we can actually define that fat. In a normal individual, this fat around the middle, that's something called omental fat as opposed to the type 2 diabetics. There's a way that we can measure not only total body fat, but fat in the abdomen. It seems to be a little bit more pathologic. Fat in the muscle. These are all, the fat in your body is in every tissue in the body, including muscles, and that is really what also contributes to your inability to control your sugar. Okay, all right, now I've given you the bad news, right? Okay, what are we doing about it? Well, one of the things that Pennington's most proud of, Catherine, is the DASH diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension. Now what is 5 years in a row? 5 years in a row is the best diet, voted the best, recognized by UN News Report as the #1 diet in America, proven to reduce blood pressure. Okay, and if you've never seen this information, it's available. But basically, Pennington was very instrumental in designing and working with this diet. The other thing that Pennington did was they were involved in the major diabetes prevention study. It's called the DPP, or the Diabetes Prevention Program. They took people at high risk. They either put them on lifestyle to get them to lose weight and exercise, a drug called metformin, or placebo. And this study is now well reported. It's got 10-year results. What happened here is basically getting individuals at lifestyle alone to lose weight, aim for about 7%, got about 5% average. Got people to exercise more. And these simple maneuvers over time reduced the progression of diabetes 58%. Now, what's striking is that there was an almost identical study done in Europe called the Finnish Diabetes Program, published around the same time, both with the same interventions, both with a 58% reduction in development of diabetes. So diabetes can be prevented. It can be prevented with mild maneuvers like lifestyle, 5% reduction in body weight, and exercise. And we're not talking about a lot. We're talking about some simple lifestyle changes, but it's important to maintain these lifestyle changes over time. The other thing is we're revolutionizing the way people think about metabolic surgery. I know Dr. Brantley here has a major program here with the Office of Group Benefits where he's looked at intensive lifestyle intervention and now studying metabolic surgery, one of the more proven methods to actually remit diabetes. Bariatric surgery has a high rate of remission of diabetes, and Dr. Brantley's group here is looking at hundreds of individuals compared to intensive lifestyle and showing some early results that, yeah, it may be a little bit more expensive up front, but down the years it's going to cost, financially have cost savings, and even more importantly, improving health of the individual. So this is a huge program here that is done with Pennington under the direction of Dr. Brantley. How many of you know that the Department of Defense is our longest running sponsor? 27 years, the Department of Defense has been coming to Pennington for nutrition guidance, for performance. We have new studies going on today. In fact, Pennington helped develop the first strike ration bar. When a soldier's in the field the first 48 hours, and he needs adequate nutrition, and he needs nutrients for resilience and stress, this is what has Pennington done, and Pennington is currently working with just about every branch of the service, and now we have software that's available to about every family member, for every service member around the world. That is the impact of Pennington, and again, many people don't appreciate that fact, but that's something that we do every day here at Pennington. Okay, how many of you have individual, I can't ask you if you have diabetes, that would be a HIPAA problem, okay, I understand. How many of you have a family member with diabetes and or obesity? Okay. How many of you know whether they're on medications for obesity and diabetes? Okay, vast majority. Well, then we're in your home every day. Because when you talk about diabetes medications and obesity medications, Pennington has been involved in approval of every obesity medication done to date, and most key diabetes medications. So when companies want to test their products, they come here, but clearly every obesity medication on the market today has been tested here in most of the classes of the diabetes medications. So what are we doing now? Well, we continue to innovate. We are part of a 7-institution consortium across Louisiana called the Louisiana Clinical and Translational Science Center. What we're trying to do is to work with other investigators to form this research infrastructure so that we can work together to solve the state problems. We have expertise here. There's expertise in Shreveport. There's expertise in New Orleans. And this is designed under one umbrella to work together, to share protocols, to work on different studies, to work across institutional barriers. And that is really the wave of the future. And Pennington has been doing this, has this grant for 4 years. We're going up for renewal in just a year or so. We have 4 federally funded centers. Each one of these centers, literally millions of dollars. One, Botanical Research Center, deals with prediabetes and mechanism development of diabetes. We have an obesity center that deals with, again, more of the clinical and basic aspects of obesity. And then we have a Center for Biomedical Research Excellence that trains the next generation of investigators. Again, things that we do here at Pennington that may not be readily apparent. Dr. Kaczmarzyk has one of 2 PCORI grants in the country, that some of the first to actually go into the clinics and teach primary care how to manage obesity, because that's where the war on obesity is going to be fought, not in the walls of Pennington, but really in the community at the primary care level. The other thing, we're very interested in pediatric obesity. As I told you with adult diabetes and obesity, once again, Louisiana seems to be at the upper limit of states that have problems with pediatric obesity. We also recognize, and this was a whole issue in diabetes care devoted to childhood obesity and diabetes. Once a child develops diabetes, it's a little bit more aggressive. It's harder to treat. As bad as the condition is for adults, it's even worse for children. It seems to be a little bit more aggressive, which is a problem, which is why we're striving to address this issue. So we've opened the Translational Research Clinic for Children. We have a pediatric obesity wing. We would love to do more pediatric studies, but this is a priority of Pennington to address the pediatric issue. Some of our investigators have put together what is called a Childhood Obesity Treatment Toolkit, a toolkit to show how pediatricians and other primary care around the state should look at obesity, should treat obesity, should identify obesity in childhood. I mean, our physicians are incredibly busy, and to any tool that you can give them that could help is going to be incredibly important. So this toolkit, why it was created? To assist providers to address the pediatric childhood obesity. Pediatric healthcare providers should use it, and it goes without saying why this is important. If our kids are developing obesity, a great deal of them now are developing type 2 diabetes, and that really has to be prevented. Okay, we're also very active, and Amanda Staiano in the program is taking the fight to the children. If they want to do text and video games, well, let's spend some calories doing video games. So she has a program to where with gaming and video gaming, they may be a little bit more active, and it's called Club Connect. And again, research studies, whatever we can do, get these individuals to move, to be active, and how that's going to affect health is something we need to do. Finally, I need to tell you the value of this. The Boy Scouts of America, the National Boy Scouts of America, were here Monday. They're rolling out a childhood obesity program. They're going to launch it this summer and really in the Jamboree in a couple of years. They've asked Pennington to work with them. This is an organization that has a reach of over 40 million kids around the country, and they've chosen Pennington to work along with several other institutions to help them direct their childhood obesity program. So we're very privileged to be working with the Boy Scouts, and we think this will be a program that can be generalizable to the population as a whole. Finally, Alzheimer's. Jeff Keller's group here at Pennington, 1 out of every 15 people in the state have some form of cognitive decline, if not Alzheimer's. He has formed the Institute for Dementia Research and Prevention. Again, the steps of trying to prevent it, detect it, treat it, and if you have it, how can that person live independently with caregivers? He has several studies going on, La Brain study and the Joe Lamar Dementia study. Each year, you can see the individuals coming in and tracking these individuals as far as what the risk factors are for dementia. And he has several studies going on now as far as trying to actually treat the disease. So the goal of the prevention program is primarily focused on dementia prevention, providing access to the latest clinical trials and educational opportunities to families for those who have Alzheimer's disease. In September, Jeff Keller's program was rewarded. He became an Alzheimer's disease cooperative study site, which now means that Pennington can participate in these large studies to offer the very latest as far as drugs and treatments and ways to prevent dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So once again, his study is linked to first trying to prevent it, detect it, interventions, and when those need caregiver intervention, has programs designed for that. All right, now I've told you our history, I've told you the concern, I've told you what we've done, I've told you what we're doing. All right, what can you do? Well, one thing you can do, obviously we'll take any donations you can give, but that's what I want you to do is to volunteer. And let me tell you the benefit of volunteering. None of the studies that we have done, none of the prevention studies could have been done. None of the diabetes studies could have been done with the findings. None of the drugs could have been developed to treat diabetes and obesity. None of this as far as being able to benefit patients with dementia if we didn't have participants. And that means you, and that means your family members. So you can help us. If you volunteer as a participant, you help us in our goal to evaluate and treat. Okay? What may help you? You may help being evaluated. Some of the tests that's doing today as far as your blood pressure, your body weight, your A1C, that type of information you'll get in a trial. And you also may be available for treatment that you can't get from your provider. So I will, if there's one thing that I want you to consider, either you or your family member consider being a participant here, that would really benefit the center as far as helping out research programs. So just a few things just to show you that some of the studies we have going on. We have a major prevention study here, one of the major prevention studies from the National Institute of Health, determining whether vitamin D can actually help prevent diabetes. So based on your hemoglobin A1C out there, they may have told you you're pre-diabetic. You may qualify for this particular study. We're also involved in a study called the GRADE study, treatment of diabetes, the largest comparative effectiveness study ever done to date by our government. And again, this is a study where we will put a person and evaluate every commercially available product for diabetes to determine what's the best combination to treat. So if you have diabetes and you're only on metformin, this may be the study for you. We have others in addition to prevention and treatment of diabetes. We have studies such as the START study looking at metabolism, and literally have dozens of other studies. I know we have a trials booth set up outside that can fit the right study for you if you're interested. I think this is, again, it would be a great benefit for us. It would be a great benefit for you. So this is what we do. There's not a parish in the state that we cannot demonstrate some type of interaction, either participating in the study, going into the parish and assessing it, having screeners from the parish. So we can say that we're just about, our work for science involves every parish in the state, or has involved participants from every parish in the state. So with that, I'll close, and again, I appreciate the invitation to be here today.